I still remember the moment the ground opened up and swallowed Greg Whitlock's shiny white Lexus, like it had been waiting for him all along. 4 seconds. That's all it took. 1 second, the car was gliding down the street. The next, it was nose down in a ragged black mouth of earth. And the worst part, I had been warning everyone for months. I'd hammered signs into the dirt, I'd handed out geological reports, I'd begged the HOA to take action. But Karen, our self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, decided my warnings were nothing more than graffiti. She painted over them, laughed at me in meetings, and turned me into the villain. Until the ground decided to prove me right. My name's Tom Walker. I'm 61, retired Army Corps of Engineers. I spent 3 decades overseas dealing with collapsing bridges, unstable soil, and terrain that could kill you if you didn't respect it. When I settled in Magnolia Ridge, I thought I was done with that fight. I thought I was moving into peace and quiet. But the ground here, this land, was never meant to hold neat little beige houses and ornamental fences. I knew it the moment I felt the soil shift under my boots after a heavy rain, like the earth was taking a deep breath before it screamed. So I did what I was trained to do. I acted. I built a sign, bright orange, bold black letters. Danger. Unstable ground. Stay off. I drove the stakes deep 3 feet back from the danger zone, just to be safe. I wasn't trying to scare people, I just didn't want a kid on a bike or a dog chasing a ball to vanish into the ground. But 2 days later, the sign was gone. Snapped in half, dumped on my porch with a sticky note from the HOA about community standards. No signature, of course, but that same morning I saw Karen marching her little designer dog past my driveway. White sneakers, red paint smudges. She looked right at me, gave me a tight smile like she'd just scrubbed graffiti off a wall, and kept walking. That was Karen in a nutshell. Mid-50s, sharp bob haircut, neon jogging outfit, clipboard glued to her hand. She ran the HOA like a dictator, scolding people over grass length and trash cans. She didn't care about safety, just appearances. At the next board meeting, I tried again. I handed out a full report, soil samples, drone shots, diagrams. She tilted her head, smiled that condescending smile, and said, "Mr. Walker, are you sure you're not exaggerating? The terrain looks visually undisturbed." Visually undisturbed, as if sinkholes care about curb appeal. A week later, the HOA newsletter landed in my mailbox. Bright colors, cheerful fonts, and tucked right in the middle a reminder that unauthorized signs or unattractive boards may result in fines. That was aimed at me. I read that line 3 times, my blood pounding. I'd spent my whole career solving real problems, floods, landslides, crumbling runways, and now I was being threatened with fines for trying to protect my neighbors. And it didn't stop there. Karen had the board issue me a citation, $75 for an unauthorized structure. The structure was my warning sign, a 2x4 board with red paint. I appealed, sent a certified letter with photos of cracks in the sidewalk, copies of my reports, even timestamps. No response. Instead, Karen herself showed up in front of my lawn one morning, snapped a photo, and walked off. A few hours later, another citation arrived. This time for my rock border, the one that had been there for 5 years without a problem. She wasn't protecting the community. She was declaring war. That's when the whisper campaign started. Neighbors crossed the street instead of waving. I could feel them watching me, muttering on their porches. I wasn't just the retired Army guy anymore. I was the problem. I started wondering if maybe I was the crazy one. Maybe the soil wasn't as dangerous as I thought. Maybe I'd spent too many years staring at cracks in the ground and seeing ghosts. For a few days, I thought about giving up, just paying the fines, tearing down the sign, letting it go. But then I remembered Afghanistan, watching an airstrip collapse because someone ignored drainage reports. I remembered my commanding officer saying, "The enemy isn't always a person. Sometimes it's a blind spot." Karen wasn't evil in a cartoon way, but she was a blind spot. She refused to see what was right under her feet, and people like that don't stop until something breaks. So I doubled down. I went digging through county archives, found old geological surveys from the 70s showing limestone caverns beneath this neighborhood. I built a digital folder, cloud-backed and password-protected photos, videos, time logs, even me rolling a marble downhill to prove the slope was shifting. I wasn't paranoid. I was preparing for war. And then my neighbor Paul came by, nervous as hell, saying he'd noticed the sidewalk tilting too. He warned me Greg Karen's husband drove over that patch every morning. He told me quietly, "I keep telling them to go around, but you know how she is." Yeah, I knew. The morning it finally gave way, I felt it before I saw it. The ground had dark patches, the sidewalk crack had widened another quarter-inch. I dropped a marble and watched it zip downward like the earth was hollow. I started recording. Then I heard the engine. Greg's Lexus glided out of the driveway, polished white, reflecting the sun. He had sunglasses on, phone pressed to his ear, not even looking. I waved, shouted, "Stop! Don't drive over." He didn't hear or didn't care. 4 seconds. That's all it took. The front tires dipped, the earth split, and the car was gone, nose first swallowed in a plume of dust. I ran, called 911, scrambled down to help pull Greg out. He was dazed, bleeding, but alive. Neighbors poured out of their houses' phones, out kids crying. And then Karen arrived, hair-wild slippers still on, screaming her husband's name. When she saw me standing there covered in dust, her face twisted. "What did you do?" she screamed. "You did this." That night I got a letter on my porch, official HOA letterhead, accusing me of soil sabotage and alarmist conduct. They even attached a photo of me crouched near the sidewalk with a marble in my hand, labeling it suspicious behavior. The irony almost made me laugh. Suspicious, for documenting the very collapse that almost killed her husband. They weren't trying to find the truth. They were trying to shift the blame. But I was ready. I uploaded everything, my entire folder of evidence, to a blog I called Sinkhole, Truth, Magnolia Ridge. Photos, reports, videos, timestamps. I sent the link to neighbors' local Facebook groups, even the news station that had been at the scene. Within 48 hours, it went viral across the county. And that's when everything turned. Reporters knocked on my door. City engineers showed up with clipboards and radar. The HOA had no choice but to hold an emergency town hall. That night, the clubhouse felt like a courtroom. Over 100 residents packed inside. Karen stood at the front, blazer, pressed eyes sharp. She tried to thank people for supporting Greg, then pivoted, called my blog misinformation. But then Denise from Lot 12 stood up and said, "You ignored his reports. I saw the emails." Another voice shouted, "He put up a warning sign. You painted over it." Karen snapped. The sign was unauthorized. "This is a community governed by standards." That was when Paul finally spoke up, voice shaking but clear. Standards. I watched that sidewalk crack every day. Tom was the only one who did anything, and you tried to shut him up. The room erupted. People who'd been silent for months were suddenly shouting, waving citations of their own, demanding answers. Karen tried to hide behind bylaws, waving papers, but no one listened. By the end of the night, a motion was called. The vote was swift, unanimous. Karen was removed on the spot. She walked out stiff-backed, but I caught her eye before she left. No more smugness, no more victory smile. Just fear, and maybe finally recognition. She had painted over my warnings, but she couldn't paint over the ground. The sinkhole had swallowed her husband's car, and with it, her power. That's where my story ends. Not with a celebration, not with champagne or smiles, but with Karen gone, and the truth finally undeniable. The earth doesn't care about bylaws or appearances. It only cares about being ignored. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: silence is never safety.